volunteer attorney program, which you'll hear more about in a minute. But before continuing any further, let me address the questions that have been pouring into our office since yesterday when petitioning candidate Joe Visconti's announcement came yesterday. We have spoken to Mr. Visconti, and regardless of his political statements regarding Mr. Foley, he has told my office directly that he is not technically withdrawing from the governor's race. The ballots are printed and set, and the optical scan voting machines have been programmed. Mr. Visconti's name will stay on all state ballots. Voters can vote for him for governor if they so choose, and the machines will accept those votes. My office will inform all local election officials that everything with the ballots should stay the same. Mr. Visconti is on the ballot. No one should act to remove his name. This is, by the way, just a typical example of some of the things that can happen the last minute when you get close to election day. Our local election officials have been working very hard to make sure they're ready to accommodate more than 1 million of our citizens exercising their right to cast a ballot. I also want to say there have been some significant changes made to how all of us coordinate our plans before election day, which means we are going to be really ready for this election day. We learned some lessons from the 2010 election and the major storms that hit our states the next two elections. I would say we're more prepared than we ever have been for voters to head to the polls tomorrow. So this morning I'm feeling thankful for the hard work of the hundreds, literally hundreds of election officials working throughout the state. This morning, this year, we implemented online voter registration, which was a great success. Over 31,000 Connecticut voters used the system to become new voters or change their registration status. More than 24,000 of those were new voters. Local election officials have also been preparing for bigger crowds than last year for election day registration, which is also a new law, and have in general been working with our office in a collaborative way to make sure everyone is ready. We at the Secretary of State's office have conducted at least 4 conference calls with hundreds of local registrars of voters to review a number of issues to help them prepare for election day and look at some hypothetical situations that could arise tomorrow. So we're ready to vote here in Connecticut. Turnout. We expect a turnout of around 55% of registered voters for this state election. That would be pretty typical for this type of election. Raw numbers, that would be about 1.1 million voters casting ballots. Looking at voter registration totals, many have been asking us for that. Here's where we stand this morning. We have 1,959,055 active registered voters in Connecticut. That includes 712,985 registered Democrats, 407,520 registered Republicans, and 818,389 unaffiliated voters. We'll have a complete breakdown for you of all the numbers in a news release later today. So far this year, we have more than 90,000 new voters register. Almost a third of those voters actually registered online using our new system. I think that's fantastic. It makes things a lot easier. Now I'm going to go over a few logistical items, and then I'm going to introduce Doug Brown, not Doug Brown, he's here too, from the Bar Association. Once again, I want to make sure I give out the Election Day hotline to anyone who sees anything troubling at the polls or encounters any problem on Election Day. Any citizen may call our hotline if they see any problem at all at the polls. It is 1-866-733-2463 or 1-866-SEEK, SEEC-info. You can also email us, elections@ct.gov. This hotline is monitored by the State Elections Enforcement Commission and will be coordinating responses to these issues with them and also federal authorities if need be. We're also conducting 3 conference calls with state and federal elections and law enforcement authorities so we can discuss any problems that come through the hotline that are more serious in nature. I also want to remind all voters it's a good idea to bring an ID with you to the polls. There's been much discussion about this. If you have a driver's license, that always works. But there are several other forms of identification that will work as well. A bank statement, a utility bill, a pay stub, a social security card. Those can all be used as identification for voters. A complete list of the acceptable forms of voter ID is available on our website, so I'll mention it here and probably again later. www.sots, as in Secretary of the State.ct.gov/vote. And there you can get all kinds of information about what you need. Polls are open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. tomorrow. You can also go online, same place, to see if you're registered to vote, see where your polling place is located, and this is the new piece. If you're not registered to vote, if you still miss all the deadlines, maybe you just moved to the state, maybe you just turned 18, didn't get around to it, thought you didn't have to change it, whatever, if you're a U.S. citizen, age 18 or older, you can still register and vote tomorrow through Election Day registration. This will be available at centralized location in every city and town in Connecticut, not at the polling places. That's because the lists are only available and they're a closed system, so no one can tamper with them. And it's only available in one place, usually in your town. Again, you can go on the website. We have a complete list of all those locations where the Election Day registration will take place. Again, you need to bring an ID to register to vote, the same thing you use for voting. So, for example, you need to use identification that shows your identity and your town of residence if you're going to register and vote on Election Day. For instance, driver's license, of course, does both those things. Social Security card, birth certificate also shows identity, as does a document with your photo and/or a signature. Utility bills, rental agreements, pay stubs, bank statements all show your residence. For voters who have moved but within their city or town, Election Day registration is not for you. If you just go to your regular polling place with a new address, you can inquire there and find out what the correct precinct is, or if you need to transfer. If you do need to transfer, it's a simple form you take and take it to your new polling place. So we encourage everyone to go online right now at sots.ct.gov to see where your polling place is, just in case things have moved around a little bit. And one more thing I do want to mention is that in addition to all the candidates on the ballot, there's also a constitutional question in front of every Connecticut voter. That question reads, shall the Constitution of the state be amended to remove restrictions concerning absentee ballots and to permit a person to vote without appearing at a polling place on the day of an election? A no vote on this question leaves our state constitution as is, permitting an absentee ballot to voters only for a narrow set of reasons: illness, physical disability, you're out of town the day of the vote, etc. There's a few more. A yes vote does not change anything overnight, since the restrictions on absentee ballots are also in our state election laws. But ratification of this amendment removes the language from the state constitution and allows our General Assembly to enact changes to our voting laws in the future that would permit things such as early voting, as more than 33 states have already done. If this amendment passes, the legislature could also enact things like no excuse absentee ballots or mail-in voting like they have in Oregon. All right, now I wanted to again briefly review a new program we started 2 years ago in partnership with the Connecticut Bar Association. The Ballot Integrity Act of 2011, enacted nearly unanimously by the General Assembly, granted me or a designee of my office new authority to enter polling places on Election Day to make sure all state and federal election laws are being complied with. We've used this authority both in 2011 and 2012 to successfully troubleshoot issues at the polls early, before they grow more serious.